Right, shall we start? Let the fight begin. Thank you, everyone. This is going to be a very, very exciting evening. I'll just give you a little bit of background to this. I know over sort of recent months, Richard has been in contact with Monty through Jancis Robinson's site, through Jancis Robinson herself, quite publicly. I think they've stated opposing views on the subject of organic viticulture and biodynamic viticulture. And both of them thought that it would be quite a good idea to actually get the two views and representatives of the two views in the same room, so we could have a debate and a discussion and some questions and see who had the strongest case for their position. So in June, we were approached with the idea of running a debate, and obviously from the WSET's point of view, this is an ideal opportunity, and the result is what you have here tonight. Richard and Monty here presenting their cases in front of you, and we'll be judging the success with which they make their cases. One other thing, tweeting is encouraged, and particularly if you are tweeting, you could use the hashtag #WSET to sort of keep everything linked together. You're not obliged to, but it keeps everything tidy. It's good for us. So tweeting is encouraged, but mobile phones, obviously, not taking calls, incoming and outcoming. So
even if it's my lawyer.
Even if it's your lawyer.
He's Italian. He's very good.
No matter how urgent, please. But yeah, tweeting is encouraged. So the proposition that we have tonight is that the UK wine trade should promote organic and biodynamic wines. That's the proposition. The UK wine trade should promote organic and biodynamic wines. And just to see where we're starting from, I'd like to take a vote from you to see who in the audience supports that statement and who opposes it. So who supports the statement that the UK wine trade should promote organic and biodynamic wines? Okay. Keep holding your hands up. I need to take a count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, I think. And Monty and Richard, you're very welcome to audit my counting if you wish. So who opposes the statement that the UK wine trade should promote organic and biodynamic wines? So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that okay?
With a big caveat.
With a big caveat.
I'll have a chance to speak about that later.
Okay, sure. And is there anybody at this stage in the don't really know camp and is going to listen to the cases? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
It's more of an abstention.
An abstention, okay. Thank you very much. So we're starting with general support for this statement. I'm just going to briefly introduce the two guests. So starting with Monty. Monty says that he sensed when he was working as a teenager on a conventionally run Bordeaux chateau that the more industrial sprays were applied to the grapes, the more additives and other corrective treatments were subsequently needed in the winery. Monty began his wine writing career in the mid-1990s, and he actually became the first wine writer really to specialise in green issues. His first book, The Organic Wine Guide, The Organic Wine Guide, became Britain's Wine Guide of the Year in 1999, and this was followed 5 years later with the multi-award-winning Biodynamic Wines published by Mitchell Beasley in 2004. More recently, 2007, when he was living in the Roussillon, Monty was the subject of Channel 4's Chateau Monty, which was the first ever TV documentary filming biodynamic winemaking from pruning to bottling. That was broadcast in 2008, and there was a book that accompanied the series, which I'm sure many of us have encountered and read and enjoyed. He's also contributed to BBC Radio and Television, and to wine, travel, and environmental newspapers and magazines in a number of countries. So that's Monty for us, for the arguing for the proposition. Richard Smart, to my left, tells me he's trodden vineyards in over 30 countries as part of his viticultural consultancy work. His viticultural career actually began with research at Griffith in New South Wales, and he was one of the first to study drip irrigation. And that was where he developed his interest about the interaction between sunshine, grapes and wine, and that has now become his principal area of expertise, which is tremendous now that he's based in the UK so much of the time. In the 1970s, he undertook doctoral research with Dr. Nelson Shawless at Cornell University, and Dr. Nelson Shawless is considered by many as the father of canopy management. And that has been the constant theme of Richard's writing and his research over the years, and that includes Sunlight into Wine, written with Mike Robinson, and that's avidly read by, I think, probably every Master of Wine student that starts on the programme, as well as many other people who are using it for their own grape production. He's won several academic and sector awards, including the Decanter Wine Magazine 50 Most Powerful Names in Wine, that was in 2005, and he was inducted into the New Zealand Wine Hall of Fame in 2006. So that's Richard Smart. I could have said these people need no introduction, but indulge me. And very briefly, me, I'm Antony Moss. I'm a very recent Master of Wine, became a Master of Wine this year, and I work here at the Wine and Spirit Education Trust as the Research and Development Director, and I will be chairing the debate tonight. I'll just give you the structure of what we're going to do before we launch into the main debate. Monty will have a chance to make a case for the proposition. He will have 15 minutes, and I have a stopwatch, and I'll be keeping time quite strictly. After that, Richard will make his case for the opposition. They will then have a chance for 10 minutes each to address the points that each other made to make their cases stronger. That will take us up to 8 o'clock. I will then be taking questions from the audience for about 25 minutes, and both Monty and Richard will have short slots of time to reply to the questions, maybe 2 minutes per question. After that, 8:25, 8:30, I will be inviting you to make statements, either supporting Richard or supporting Monty. And I'm hoping that there will be an even number of statements from either side, but based on the vote that I've just taken, I see that could be quite tricky. So if you are supporting the opposition, please speak up at that point. Following that, there will be a chance for some concluding remarks from either side. Then I will bring the debate to a close, and we will take a vote at the end. And the debate, the judging of the debate will be based on the difference between the vote at the start and the vote at the end. So be open-minded, listen to what is said, and I will now hand over to Monty, who will make the case for the proposition. Monty.
Thanks.
Well, I mean, the proposition is one I agree with, but I'm also slightly nervy about any kind of nanny statism. I think you should wear your seatbelt because it's going to save your life, not because you're going to get a fine from the police. Having said that, obviously I'm a big promoter of organic and biodynamic, and that stems. And when I first encountered biodynamic wine, it wasn't because I was born into wine, or I went to a Steiner school, or I didn't even know what biodynamic was. I just tasted a wine one day in Bordeaux, having been around all the famous chateaux, the Parker Point 100 kind of wineries, and I was just bored out of my mind. I just thought these wines are not real. If you look at the state of the soil at the front of the winery and the state of the vines at the front of the winery, not a blade of grass, vines looking very, very tired and fagged out, and I cancelled. I had 4 appointments in one day, I think, and I cancelled the 4th one, which it takes a bit of balls to do when you're a snotty little nosed English wine nobody, basically. And I went to see a guy in Fronsac, as a friend of mine who used to fix wines for all the famous enologists in Bordeaux. He said, you should go there because you'll find this guy's doing something that you might like, and that's what he said. Anyway, so I knocked on this guy's door, hadn't made an appointment, and he invited me, and I tried his wine, and this wine was it was just different. It had life, it had vitality, freshness, lift. And I said, what are you doing? You're doing something different. He said, oh no, I'm not doing very much. I just dig the grape, I put them in the tank. I said, come on, you're doing something. You must be doing something, because I haven't had a wine like this. I've been running around Fronsac and Saint-Emilion-Pomerol trying all these really famous wines. And I literally had to drag him by his elbow out into his vineyard because I said, you must be doing so. It's not the winemaking because this is a very unmade wine. And in the end, he took me out to the vineyard and I could actually dig my hands into his soil. It's a very sort of biodiverse vineyard. And I said, right, what is it that you're doing? And he was ashamed, I think, to tell me because at that stage biodynamics was seen the kind of the voodoo black magic. And I'm amazed actually that almost 20 years on we've still got that perception. And I think the reason we have that perception is I think lazy journalism as much as anything. And you can say people like me who bang the drum for biodynamics are partly guilty, but I think it's very easy to sort of make a sort of a headline knocking something that seems a little bit weird. Well, I don't think biodynamics is at all weird. There are some weird aspects to it, but I think the ultimate aim of biodynamics, it's a stated aim, is to make your vineyard, your farm, as self-sufficient as possible. To make your vineyard a self-sufficient farm organism. And we're obsessed about terroir, and why every wine we buy has got a terroir stamp on it. It says Chablis, or it says Champagne, or it says Volnay, or whatever it is, and that means it's a wine that comes from a certain place. You're buying this wine because it comes from a certain place, and it should taste of that certain place. So, we have the terroir for pork pies. Pork pie is a terroir. Parmigiano cheese, I live in Italy, that's got a terroir stamp to it. And if you're putting your neck above the parapet by sticking that on your label, as actually everybody in the wine industry does, whether it's not just Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand, it's Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, then I think it behoves you to try and at least get closer to that idea of a terroir-driven wine. And the more self-sufficient you become, which is a stated aim of all biodynamic farmers, they may not all get there, but some of them now are doing that, wine growers. That surely must be a good thing. I really find it difficult to argue against that concept, even if you think some of the biodynamic aspects of sort of howling at the moon, all that kind of thing. That's all fine. We can all have a laugh about that. But that stated aim of self-sufficiency, for me, is the absolutely fundamental thing that we all need to address. We all know it. We can have as many iPhones as we want, but we all need to be much more self-sufficient and more sustainable. And some of the negatives that have been thrown about against organic and biodynamic when I started out was that the wines are crap. Well, okay, you go to Olivier's and Humbret and Claude Lefebvre and you say, right, what was your wine like before and what's it like now? And they've just converted to biodynamics. Now, is it just a fluke that those wines have changed? Is it because of the biodynamics, or is it because they're looking at some of the inputs they were using before in terms of fertiliser, particularly in terms of fertiliser? You look at the Flave, under the old boy, it was a very over-fertilised vineyard. I mean, Pouligny sells for lots of dosh. Fertiliser is a little bit expensive. They come from fossil fuels. But you can sort of, you say, well, hang on, I'm going to produce as much wine as I can because the French government allows me to do that. And you'd be stupid not to. You can see why they would do that. If you could produce 60 hectolitres of Pouligny, why would you want to produce 45? Why would you want to go for the slightly lower yield biodynamic option? And I think that shows a very short-term approach to your farming. You've got to look at, what biodynamics teaches you to do is to look much more long-term at your yields. You do get lower yields. You should be getting slightly smaller berries, but you're going to get more consistent yields with biodynamics. That's one of the aims, again, of biodynamics, because your plants are becoming more resistant. You're thinking more as a farmer, and your vines ultimately are going to be thinking more as plants. And another criticism that was levelled at biodynamics was, it's more labour intensive. Well, what's wrong with that? Why is that a problem? If it's more labour intensive, it means that you're using machinery less, you're burning less fossil fuel. And I think that a hand-grown wine with hand leaf plucking and hand pruning and hand picking, that's just basic viticulture. It's nothing to do with biodynamics or biodynamic preparations or Steinerite thought or anything like that. It's just good common sense viticulture. But yeah, it does cost money. And we've got ourselves into a state, I think, as a generation, or even for the last 2 or 3 generations, is particularly in big wine producing areas like France, we're taxing employers. People that employ people you get really badly taxed. I know that from making wine in France. Picking grapes in France, it was 4 pieces of paper I had to fill out. It's just as a grape picker, employing people, it's even worse. And so I think you can criticise biodynamics for the making use of more labour because it's more costly, but I think if you're getting a better quality product, and some people think that biodynamic wine isn't any different, there's no difference in a biodynamic wine and a conventional wine, well, I strongly disagree with that. And I think it's not just about the biodynamic preparations or biodynamic compost or working with the moon. It is also about the hand of man, because the hand of man is a very important part of terroir. You know, we have massive levels of youth unemployment, and you look at Spain and France and Italy and the United Kingdom. Long-term unemployed, more likely to drink, take drugs, break the law, be bad parents. You know, we need to get more people onto our agricultural land, whatever we're growing, whether it's carrots or wine or whatever, because it makes sense for us as a society. It makes sense for us as food and wine consumers. You know, get these fat, you know, the denigrated youths who are seen just to be going to McDonald's every day with their benefits and smoking a load of dope. We'll get them farming. Make it easier seriously. What I mean, get more people onto the land. We know that gardening, 10 minutes of gardening, will prolong your life if you do it every day, because you're becoming a little bit healthier. You're engaging your mind. You're getting away from your desk. That's got nothing I'm saying to biodynamics and preparations and moon stuff. That's just basic common sense. And another criticism of biodynamics is, well, you use some of the sprays that conventional guys use. Well, actually, the inputs that you're allowed in a conventional system are, say, that. In the organic and biodynamic system of that, you can't obviously use weed killers, etc. But you can use things like copper and sulfur, which is a big bone of contention. It is the Achilles heel, I think, of biodynamics. Well, copper isn't used by all biodynamic producers or biodynamic wine producers. They have to use much less than their conventional counterparts. If they're stimulating their soils with more humus via compost, not the garlic dip, that copper is going to be mobilised more quicker. And even Richard's on record as saying that in the Oxford Wine Companion, copper toxicity. And what you're now seeing is, because even biodynamic growers do not want to use copper, you're seeing a growth of vineyards just working using compost teas. That's basically, you make some compost, you stick it in it like a tea bag, you stick it in a tank, you bubble some air through it to make sure the organisms in that compost are alive, and you spray them on your vines. And all what they do is they're just taking the space of all the bad organisms that you don't want. So the bad organisms like powdery mildew or botrytis can't actually get in there. So if you're making your own compost and you've got some of your own animals to create that self-sustaining farm organism by being more biodiverse, you've got a source of your manure, you're composting it, you're putting it into your soil, you're going to get better water penetration, you're going to get better water retention, you're going to get better nutrient release, you're going to get deeper rooting plants because you have more oxygen in the soil, and the macronutrients that kind of make up the terroir flavour, we think, the sort of trace elements, are more easily transported into the vine via microbes that live on the vine roots. You're going to get more of a terroir wine below ground, and you're going to, as I said, less erosion that your neighbour has to clean up, and less drift from pesticides that somebody else again has to clean up. And then if you're using that compost on your vine canopy as well, you're basically getting rid of those two Achilles heels, copper and sulfur, as well as not using the weed killers and the pesticides, etc., etc., etc. So that really is the target. I'm not saying all biodynamic growers are there yet, but more of them worldwide are doing that. They're using, yarrow, dandelion, nettle, all these medicinal plants that we used to use 150 years ago that we kind of forgot about. And again, in terms of cost, you're not raising an invoice. You're not phoning up a company on the other side of the world. Can you sell me some Chilean nitrate? Can you sell me some copper sulfate? Can you sell me some sulfur? So your invoicing is less, and every pound that you keep in your local community is worth about £8 to that local community. So in terms of the sustainability of your own farm, it makes sense to not buy stuff in from outside. From the sustainability factor of your local community, if you're recycling more money in your local community by also giving employment, by giving the opportunity for employment, because if the biodynamic thing or the organic thing works, which it seems to be working, because 10 years ago there were less than 1% of world vineyards were organic, and now we're way over 5%. So been a big change. The world vineyard has got smaller, but the amount of growers converting has got larger. And on that basis alone, I think the wine trade has to sit up and take notice. People aren't converting just to get Jancis's attention, or people like her. They're converting because they see that it works. And if you look at where the biggest conversions have occurred recently, the places like Alsace and Burgundy, it's where you have, and Germany where I work, I consult a manager, it's where those vineyards have been interplanted because of Napoleonic inheritance laws. The bit of Germany I'm in used to be French, actually, the Pfalz. And initially, when we started going biodynamic, we said, well, don't do that, you're going to bring lots of disease over here. We don't want you going organic because it's going to be really bad. And after a few years, when they see that actually it does work, the big changes happen in terms of the vine canopy, in terms of the erectness of the shoots, in terms of the soil life. Then they're leaning over the fence and actually, can you tell me how are you doing this? And that is so clear. It's almost like an infection, and and then Champagne has probably been the most resistant to that. But I think Champagne is very much a special case. Okay, but in normal wine regions, you're seeing people leaning over the garden fence and saying, what you're doing really does seem to work. Now, there's a lot of scientists, though, there's no, biodynamics isn't backed up by science. I would really love a scientist to tell me why horn manure, which is one of the key core preparations in biodynamics, we bury some manure in a cow horn for 6 months over the winter, why does it contain so many more microbes than the manure that it began with, or the soil around it? Why is it? Why is that? Science knows all the answers. You should tell us why is that the case? Laverstock Park, which is owned by J.D. Schechter, I went with Nick is in the audience. We went to a presentation earlier on this year, and they analysed their horn manure, and then they analysed their own organic compost, which they commercially sell. They did a trial, and they found that the biodynamic horn manure contained many, many more microbes. Everything they analysed, much more in the horn manure than in their own commercially sellable compost. So they went biodynamic. Now that, for me, they do a trial, they research it, they do some scientific analysis, and actually this works. We don't know how it works, but it does seem to work. And I think that's the best thing about biodynamics, in a way. There are parts of it that you can analyse, there are parts of it that you can't analyse, but it does seem to work. All the wine growers on the planet who've gone biodynamic, you've got some charlatans in there as well, but most of them are saying, look, they say to me when I interview them for books, I don't know how it all works, but it does seem to. Now, it's a little bit like me saying, I can't show you Jesus, but I know that he exists. I can appreciate it for a lot of people. You think, well, hang on, that's odd and weird. But these are people whose lives depend on selling a product, and if they're converting and sticking with the program, it must mean at some level it's working, and ultimately it's got to work economically. There's no point being green in the field if you haven't got any greenbacks in the bank. That's a classic kind of biodynamic expression. And the thing about wine is we are very poncy in wine. We really think we're superior to a lot of other people because we're wine experts, and we have this incredibly bad reputation amongst normal people, wine snobs. And I think often that is really justified. The one Achilles heel we've got as an industry is these nasty stories about vineyard workers getting poisoned. A French guy died last year, and the French government said he was poisoned by vineyard chemicals. The New York Supreme Court has said that the world's biggest brand of weed killer is not safe. It's not equivalent to eating a tablespoonful of salt, as the marketeer said. The New Zealand government has said the same. Other governments say, if we all want to get rid of those nasty stories in the wine trade that we have real difficulty dealing with, again, that's another reason why we should, I think, at least accept and investigate and be more understanding of the organic and biodynamic way. It's not a perfect system, but it's certainly moving in the right direction. And one good example of a vineyard where it's almost looking at zero carbon emissions in terms of its production is Saracen in New Zealand, where I was only on this year. We've got 150 hectares, 50 hectares sprayed only with herb teas, no copper, no sulphur, and sprayed with a horse. Everything they need for their compost is grown on site, whether it's wood chips or manure, etc., etc. That is the perfect system for me. If you close the farm gate and you're making a high quality wine, I find it difficult how anybody could argue against that. Is that it?
That's perfect.
There we go.
Thank you.